My parents left me hungry and alone at 13. When my uncle died, they demanded millions, but the lawyer's secret clause left them with nothing. My parents abandoned me when I was a child, and the only person who stood up was my uncle. Years later, I'd established my own life and business, and I thought I was done with them. It turns out they had different intentions. Let's just say that things got messy. People assume that when parents abandon their child, it will result in a dramatic conflict or a screaming match. For me, it was just another frigid Tuesday morning, and I awoke to an empty apartment and a note on the counter. My life had appeared to be normal up until that point. I was Noah, 13 years old, the only child living with my parents. Dad had a modest used vehicle lot a few blocks away. If you've ever drove past one of those businesses with the inflatable tube man flying around, that was essentially his empire. He pretended to be a business tycoon, yet half of his time was spent gambling in casinos rather than selling vehicles. Mom maintained a daycare from her apartment. She kept it going for a time, but after her depression worsened, parents stopped bringing their children. When a babysitter cancels 3 days in a row, word spreads quickly. At first we appeared to be a normal family. We had Friday movie evenings with microwave popcorn, camping vacations in this worn-out tent that leaked when it rained, and cinnamon buns on Christmas morning. Nothing flashy, but it was ours. Then cracks started appearing. I'd overhear them arguing late at night. Dad would arrive home later and later, always smelling of old smoke and grease rather than dealership floor polish. Mom spent more time in bed, blinds closed. When I asked about groceries, she told me to make do with cereal or whatever crumbs we had. Dad agreed to turn it over every week. Promises were his preferred currency, as they were inexpensive and simple to spend. I tried to stay consistent, kept my grades up, cleaned the place without being asked, and didn't complain about wearing the same shoes till the soles were nearly worn through. I assumed if I was perfect enough, they'd notice and pull it together. But kids don't fix grown-ups, as I discovered the hard way. I woke up late on the day everything fell apart. Nobody shook me for school. The apartment was really quiet. Too quiet. Their bedroom door was wide open, which was unusual because Mom always shut it on bad days. I looked inside, and half the closet was empty. Drawers were emptied out, leaving socks and other miscellaneous items behind. On the kitchen counter there was a note written by Mom. "Noah, we can't do this anymore. Your Uncle Graham will take care of you. We apologize." 16 words. That was it. I dialed Mom's cell phone and it went straight to voicemail. I tried Dad's number. Already disconnected. I scoured the premises for contact information, an address book or whatever. Nothing. It's just me, the note, and stillness. That night, I stayed up on the couch, staring at the phone, as if it owed me a response. On day 2, the landlord turned up, hammering on the door about rent. I explained that my parents were gone, but he glanced at me as if he knew better. Muttered something about contacting social services. That's when terror struck. On day 3, I gave up and called my school counselor. She did not waste time. The next thing I know, Child Protective Services came knocking. Mr. Barrett, the social worker, spoke in a calm way, as if he was trying to keep me from breaking. He called, shuffled documents, and claimed they had found my father's brother, Uncle Graham. Uncle Graham had become somewhat of a ghost name in my family. I'd seen him maybe twice. My parents always referred to him as chilly, stuck up, and too obsessed with his luxury house design business. He resided in another state, never married, and had no children. But, guess what? He was the only individual who answered the phone when CPS contacted. When Graham strolled in the next morning, it was as if a whole new planet had entered our bleak apartment. Black vehicle in front, smart suit, silver cufflinks, and slicked back hair. He looked more at home in a boardroom than in my kitchen. He inspected the area, groaned and said, "Pack what you can carry. The rest can be shipped later." No hugs or sugarcoating, just down to business. And that's how my childhood ended. Quiet, untidy, and accompanied by a stranger who turned out to be the only adult in attendance. Graham did not waste time. While the CPS representative was filling out papers, he stood in the midst of our cramped living room, as if he were conducting an inventory check. He didn't seem sad. He did not appear shocked. He just seemed efficient. "1 suitcase," he reminded me, "not 2. We're not hauling junk." I recall gazing at my belongings, the pictures on my wall, my video games, and felt a mixture of panic and rage. But I did not argue. Something about the way he said it made it plain there was no space for compromise. I shoved all I could into a faded blue suitcase. Clothes, a few books, and a photograph of me and my mother at the park. I left everything else behind. CPS would handle it, Graham stated. On the way to his house, he scarcely spoke. Every now and then he would look in the rearview mirror and inquire if I was hungry or needed to use the restroom. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Perhaps they are comforting words. Instead, it felt as if I had been drafted into a military program. Orders only. No small talk. When we arrived at his place 3 hours later, I knew house wasn't the correct term. It was a full-blown Victorian home, the kind you'd see in a historical magazine. Tall iron fence, groomed grounds, and stone statues I couldn't identify. I stepped out of the car, still wearing the same hoodie I'd been wearing for days, and felt as if I had arrived on another planet. Graham went in after me, gave the place a quick inspection and said, "Don't touch the curtains with dirty hands. Breakfast is at 7 a.m., that's all." He then left me standing there. That night, I did not cry. I was too wired. Everything felt fleeting, as if I messed up, he'd contact CPS and send me somewhere else. I stayed awake, staring at the carved ceiling, promising myself that I'd follow his instructions until I found out an escape route in case I needed one. The rules came quickly. Shoes off in the house, homework done at a desk rather than on the couch, and 1 hour of piano practice every day. It didn't matter that I had no talent. I broke practically every one within the first month, not on purpose half of the time, but simply because I wasn't used to structure. When I walked into the kitchen at 8, the stove was cold, and he was reading the paper. "Kitchen closes at 7:30, he'd remark, not looking up. No yelling or guilt trips, just penalties. That was the thing about Graham. He did not operate on emotions. He acted more like a boss than an uncle. If my schoolwork wasn't completed, my weekend plans were canceled. If I did not follow through, I would lose my privileges. He never threatened to get rid of me, however. That was the difference. Every punishment has an endpoint, and once it was finished, life returned to normal. The first break in his steel wall appeared around 2 weeks in. I was in my room, staring at an old photo of my parents' wedding day. I didn't hear him enter. He noticed me trying to wipe my tears discreetly. Instead of making a speech, he simply offered me a handkerchief, perched on the edge of the bed, and remained there until I gathered myself together. There is no advice or pity. Only presence. Strangely, that was superior to any "I'm sorry" statement. Graham's life revolved around systems. Whitaker Home Collections wasn't just a furniture store. He'd established an entire chain of luxury decor businesses spanning 3 states. He approached everything like business, including me. On weekends, he would drag me to meetings. "Watch how they talk," he'd say quietly. "See who speaks first, who gives in, and who maintains eye contact." I was 14 years old and taught negotiation skills before I could even complete algebra, but don't get me wrong, he was strict as hell. I was grounded for not polished my shoes before school. He once made me redo an essay 3 times because I wrote "cool" instead of "effective." And if I rolled my eyes, he'd raise an eyebrow and remark, "Be careful, Noah, the world will not bend just because you're irritated." But there was something solid beneath the sarcasm. Unlike my parents, he did not disappear when things became difficult. That first year, I challenged him 100 times, skipping piano, sneaking TV on weeknights, and hoping he wouldn't cast me away like my parents had. He never did. He punished me, but he stayed. And I gradually realized that this was not a one-time occurrence. Looking back, the first year with Graham laid the groundwork for everything that happened after. Address at the time, all I knew was that I'd gone from being abandoned as a child in a run-down apartment to living in a mansion with a snarky, rule-obsessed uncle who somehow convinced me that I wasn't disposable. Even though I wouldn't accept it at the time, a part of me began to wonder if this wasn't such a bad deal. Graham was not the type to let you go. He checked my public school grades and basically stated, "This won't cut it." Before I knew it, I was enrolled at Westfield Academy. The school was tough. The classes were more challenging than anything I'd ever seen. Kids were talking about summer vacations to Europe while I was still learning out which fork to use at supper thanks to Graham's incessant table etiquette drills. I felt like I was drowning throughout my first semester. I'd spend hours at my desk eating through textbooks and still barely get by. Graham's reply was not sympathetic. One night I came to dinner virtually in tears because of geometry proofs. He laid down his fork, gave me that look like I was wasting oxygen, and continued. "Your circumstances changed for no reason of your own, but your response is entirely up to you. Use the chance or waste it. I don't invest in lost causes." This irritated me, but it also hit home. He was not going to give me sympathy points. If I wanted to fit in at that school, I had to work hard, which I did. I used the allowance he granted me to hire a peer tutor. I created study groups. By junior year, I had clawed my way into the honor roll. Graham noticed. He didn't say, "Good job," or clap me on the back. He simply put a new leather briefcase on my bed one morning saying, "You'll need this." That was his version of pride. At home, punishment was not optional. I used to believe he was merely controlling, but then I learned it was for training. He wanted me to be bright, organized, and ready to work at his level. It irritated me at first, but I eventually realized that those behaviors offered me an advantage. Teachers at school would comment on how well prepared I was. Classmates wondered how I always had notes ready. Graham refused to accept mediocrity. The true conflict arose during college applications. I planned to attend State University. A group of my Westfield friends were going there, and honestly, all I wanted was something familiar. Graham was not having it. He strolled into my room one night, dropped a stack of Ivy League and top-tier school brochures and said, "Apply to these." I lost it. "Why should you worry where I go? State is a fantastic school. It's my life, not your project." He remained composed, of course. "Your friends are thinking about social lives. I'm thinking about your future. You have potential. Don't waste it hiding in your comfort zone." That continued to alarm me. "I never asked to be your project. Maybe I just want to be normal for once." His response was chilly and sharp. "And I never asked to be your guardian. Yet here we are. I'm giving you opportunities your parents never had. You're welcome." That gave me a headache. Not because he was incorrect, but because it was the first time he acknowledged the obvious. Neither of us had requested this arrangement, but we were stuck with it, and in his own way, he was attempting to provide me with an opportunity that my parents would never have given me. Later that night he finally opened up, which he nearly never did. He informed me that my father was a talented mathematician who was unable to attend college due to financial constraints. That he worked at a gas station while Graham received the scholarship. He resented me for many years. Graham remarked, "Your mother was also smart. But her prospects dried up. I will not let that happen to you." Hearing that altered everything. It did not warm him up, but it did explain why he pushed so hard. For him, this was about more than simply me. It was about breaking the cycle. I ended up applying to 7 schools just to prove that I was not intimidated. I had 5 options and chose Northwestern, a good blend of prominence and distance. When the acceptance letter arrived, Graham did not smile or cheer. He merely handed me a pen and said, "Sign it. Tuition's covered." There's no drama or sentiment, just action. I couldn't deny it, no matter how much I wanted to protest. His approach was working. By the time I prepared for college, I had changed from the kid who strolled into his mansion with only one suitcase. I was brighter, more confident, and perhaps more like him than I cared to acknowledge. College was the first time I felt like I had room to breathe. Northwestern wasn't easy, but compared to Graham's house, it was manageable. I knew how to get up early, manage my time effectively, and work harder than anyone else. While some kids were missing lessons because they partied too late, I arrived with a briefcase in hand, already 5 steps ahead. I joined clubs, challenged myself with group projects, and discovered that I had a talent for design and marketing strategy. Graham's observe everything lessons paid off. I could read a room, figure out who was lying, and utilize silence to coerce individuals into filling holes. It made presentations feel more like negotiations, which instructors observed. Graham didn't soften much while I was gone, but the distance altered our relationship. Calls grew less formal. He would occasionally crack a snarky joke. When I complained about the dining hall cuisine, he remarked, "Good. Consider it training for the real world, where everything tastes bland if you're doing it right." I worked at Whitaker Home Collections every summer. Graham didn't only assign me easy jobs, he moved me between departments as if he were testing me. Inventory one summer, vendor negotiations the next, followed by marketing. By the time I graduated, I knew the company inside and out. After graduation, I relocated back to the mansion. This time, not as a misplaced child, but as the company's new marketing director. We had a routine. 2 independent men share a home. Occasionally they eat together, and occasionally they just pass each other with nods. It was pleasant. Strict, but pleasant. Over the next 6 years, I worked my way up. First as an assistant marketing director, then as head of the entire function. We launched 2 new shop formats, updated vendor relationships, and established a profitable e-commerce engine. By then, I was 27 years old. Then everything shifted. Graham sat me down one night, abnormally silent, and mentioned the word leukemia. No build-up, no soothing tone, simply the facts. It's advanced. The prognosis isn't good. Treatments will buy time, not fix it. This hit me like a truck. But Graham was not searching for sympathy. He handled it like any other business problem. We all die, he explained. The only variables are when and how we use the time before. After that, our roles switched. I took on the responsibility of keeping him on track. Medications, doctor visits, ensuring he ate. Graham would roll his eyes whenever I reminded him, but he never fought me. He knew I was running things his way, which was direct and rigorous. At work, he progressively handed me the reins. First, lesser projects, then complete decision-making. He did not hover. If I made a mistake, he would sarcastically point it out before letting me rectify it. Employees who had previously looked at me as the youngster began coming to me first once Graham made it obvious that I was not a placeholder. I was the future. The disease had stripped some of his armor. Not entirely. Even though he was hooked up to IVs, he continued to scream out snarky lines. But in calmer moments, he revealed a side I hadn't seen. When I helped him into bed one night, he gripped my wrist with surprising strength and murmured, "You were the son I never allowed myself to have." That was Graham's way of delivering a sentimental nuke. I wasn't sure what to say. I only nodded since speaking would have been false. 8 months later, he was gone. He slept peacefully. The funeral was not large. Mostly business associates, a few distant relatives, and staff that admired him. I stood at the graveyard, understanding that the guy my parents had always characterized as cold and arrogant was the only one who turned up, the only one who had genuinely built me into someone capable of standing on his own. The mansion seemed empty without his scathing remarks booming through the halls. I'd find myself saving things that I thought he'd enjoy, or mentally planning how I'd tell him about a new technique before realizing he wasn't there anymore. But, whether I was in mourning or not, I did not neglect my business. If Graham taught me one thing, it was that action matters more than words. So I honored him by keeping Whitaker Home Collection strong and running business the way he taught me. Sharp, disciplined, and with no and half effort. This was my life for 3 weeks. Business, solitude, the heaviness of an empty house. Then the lawyer's letter arrived. A will reading was scheduled. I assumed it would be me, some business partners, and maybe a charity or two. I had no idea my parents were about to come back into my life. Weeks passed before I received a call from Caldwell, Graham's attorney. His voice sounded calm and prepared, as if he delivered this speech 100 times. "Noah, it's time we read Graham's will. I'll need you downtown next Friday." I responded, "Sure," before hanging up. I didn't think much about it until Friday came. I strolled into the marble lobby and spotted 2 folks I hadn't seen in 15 years. They were not invited. They interrupted Graham's obituary reading. They made enough noise in the foyer that Caldwell allowed them to seat so he could record their lack of standing. My parents. They walked in as if they belonged there. My mother donned a blazer that screamed outlet store business chic, with pearls swinging like she was auditioning for rich grandmother. My father wore a too-tight navy suit, his jaw clenched as if he were about to close a deal. Their gaze fixed on me and froze. "Noah," my mother gasped. "Look at you, honey." Dad gave a curt nod. "You've grown." "Yeah, tends to happen when you feed a kid instead of tossing him outside with a trash bag," I replied. The secretary blinked awkwardly and took us to Caldwell's conference room. A long table, legal documents neatly piled, and Caldwell at the head in his clean suit, adjusting his spectacles as if preparing to defuse a bomb. He cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming. We're here to read Graham Whitaker's last will and testament." My mother raised her hand, as if she were in school. "Before you start, we're Noah's parents. Graham may have stepped in, but obviously family has rights." I smirked. "Yeah, you remember that 15 years ago? Or just today?" Caldwell disregarded the jab and opened the folder. He read steadily, without fluff. Graham Whitaker leaves the following to his legal ward. Noah Grant. Primary residence, valued at $1.8 million. Cash savings of $2 million. And 70% ownership of Whitaker Home Collections, valued at approximately $45 million. The words hung in the air, like smoke. I reclined back with arms folded. My parents sat transfixed, blinking as if their minds had short-circuited. Finally my mother said, That's everything." Caldwell nodded. "Correct. Graham's instructions are clear. The estate passes entirely to Noah." My father sprang forward in his chair. "This is outrageous. Graham manipulated him. We should at least be co-managers. Noah is young, he needs guidance." I laughed. "Guidance? You guys couldn't guide me to a bus stop." Caldwell raised his hands. "I understand emotions are high, but Mr. Whitaker's wishes are explicit. If you'd like to contest, you may. I'll warn you, This document is airtight. Mom leaned in, false tears beginning to shimmer. We're not contesting. We just want to help. Noah, honey, you know paperwork like this is confusing. You shouldn't have to handle all this pressure alone. Let us manage it for you, just until you're settled. I stared at her. You kicked me out at 13. I think I'll manage a house deed without your supervision. Dad tightened his teeth and whispered, ungrateful. Caldwell, obviously bored of the hoopla, stacked the papers. We'll reconvene later this week to finalize signatures. For today, let's adjourn. And just like that, the meeting ended. My parents followed me out of the building, almost rushing to keep up. Noah, wait, Mom said. Can we talk? Just dinner maybe, please? Normally I would have told them to shove it, but curiosity, and perhaps a sick sense of humor, had me nodding. Fine. One dinner tonight. We met in a mid-range Italian restaurant near my home. When I arrived they were already seated, menus untouched, and faces rehearsed. Mom started softly. We made mistakes. We know that. But you have to understand. Your father had problems back then. Gambling issues. It ruined our finances. And me? Well, I was dealing with depression. We weren't ourselves. I mixed my drink with a straw. You don't say. I thought kicking your kid out was just a new parenting trend. They giggled uneasily, then exchanged glances. And just like that, the sympathy act failed. Dad leaned in. We need help, Noah. Things haven't been easy. We're in debt. Your mom's medical bills alone. Mom cut him off, voice low and urgent. If you could spare $100,000 just to get us stable again. I laughed so loudly that the waiter glanced over. $100 grand? That's your opener? Not even a warm-up, just straight to 6 figures. Dad's cheeks turned red. You have millions now. Don't act like this is difficult. I reclined back, arms wide, and enjoyed the performance. Correction, I have millions. You have pasta you haven't ordered yet. Mom's voice became sharper. We're your parents. We deserve consideration. I shrugged. You deserved consideration 15 years ago. You didn't want it then. Silence extended. The waiter eventually arrived to take orders. Awkward as hell. I chose lasagna because I knew they couldn't afford more than excuses. Dinner ended quickly. They made another appeal for money. I told them to obtain a job. Dad said something about ungrateful children destroying family legacies. Mom wiped her eyes with a tissue, as if she were auditioning for pity. I walked out feeling lighter. Not because I saw them again, but because I was certain nothing had changed. Same entitlement. Same games. The only difference this time was that I had the upper hand. And watching them squirm for a handout was more valuable than the inheritance itself. A week later, I was back in Caldwell's office. This time, it was not just me and him. My parents had brought in their own counsel, a man in a wrinkled gray suit who appeared to have gotten lost on his way to traffic court. They strutted in behind him like kings, shoulders back, smirks painted on their faces, as if this was their victory lap. Ready to correct this little misunderstanding? My father asked, dropping his briefcase on the table as if he were preparing to buy the building. Misunderstanding? I inquired. Yeah, must have slipped Graham's mind when he raised me for 15 years and you didn't. Mom flashed me a phony smile. Noah, honey, we're not here to fight you. We just don't want you to drown in responsibilities you don't understand. A company worth millions, properties, assets, this isn't a toy box. I slumped back in my chair. You're right. It's not. That's why Graham actually trained me for this stuff while you were too busy pretending I didn't exist. Caldwell cleared his throat, then handed a binder across the table. Before this meeting continues, there are a few clarifications we need to put on record. Their attorney puffed up. We're prepared to challenge the will. These parents were clearly cut out unfairly. This boy, he pointed at me as if I weren't in the room, was manipulated. I grinned. Love when I get downgraded to, this boy. Makes me feel like a gladiator about to crush someone. Caldwell did not even blink. He opened the binder and began spreading everything out page by page. First, Noah was not just Graham's ward. At 16, Graham legally adopted him. Here are the documents, signed, sealed, and approved by the court. The lawyer's pen froze in midair. My mother's mouth absolutely fell. What? She hissed. That's impossible. Caldwell moved the papers closer. Not impossible. Legal fact, which means by law, Mr. and Mrs. Grant, you have no standing in this estate. Dad's cheeks got bright red. We are his biological parents. I shrugged. Congrats. Biology makes you donors, not parents. Caldwell persisted, calm as ever. Second, Mr. Whitaker anticipated this. He hired private investigators. We have reports documenting repeated attempts you both made over the years to extort money from him, including phone records, bank transfers, even emails. He made a tapping noise. It's all here, every attempt to squeeze him dry, and now, after his death, here you are again. Their lawyer shuffled papers as if he wanted to hide beneath the table. Caldwell was not done. Third, Mr. Whitaker left a personal letter. I'll read it now. He opened a page, cleared his throat and started. Noah, if they've shown up, I told you they would. They won't change. They'll circle back when they smell money. Don't let them take what you've earned. If they try, this letter is your shield. Remember, family isn't who brings you into the world. It's who shows up when the world walks out. The room was really silent. Caldwell then dropped the last hammer. And lastly, the nuclear clause. If anyone contests this will, all assets, house, savings, company, stake, automatically transfer to charity, specifically the Children's Cancer Foundation. To be clear, only parties with legal standing can trigger that clause. Outsiders can't, and Mr. and Mrs. Grant have no standing. I couldn't help it. I began laughing. So go ahead, sue me. The only thing you'll win is a donation drive. My mother smashed her hand on the table. This is theft. You can't steal our son and our inheritance. Funny, I commented, leaning nearer. Because last time I checked, you already threw your son out. Now you're just mad someone better took your spot. Dad snarled. You'll regret this. I leaned back, relaxed as always. No, I won't. But you might regret not investing in a mirror. That irritated Mom. You little brat. After everything we gave you. Like what? I interrupted. The night you dumped me on a sidewalk, or the years of silence after? Real Hallmark stuff. They tried to shout over me and use every guilt trip in the book. We are your true family. You'll understand what loyalty entails when you're older. Graham brainwashed you. But that was pathetic. They sounded like children whining after being caught stealing cookies. The lawyer attempted to pull them in, but they were too far gone. Mom gestured at me as if she were conjuring lightning. You think you're so clever, but you're still just a child. You'll fall apart without us. I smirked. I've been falling apart without you my whole life. Guess what? I'm still standing. Caldwell waved, and 2 building security guards entered. That will be all. Please escort Mr. and Mrs. Grant out. The look on their faces as security took a step forward was priceless. They began protesting, stating they had a right to be there and wanting to talk with someone higher up. But Caldwell simply closed his binder and announced, "Meeting is over." Watching my parents being marched out of that glass tower, screaming and writhing as everyone in the lobby stared. That was the kind of satisfaction money couldn't buy. Their screams of betrayal, loyalty, and blood rang around the marble hall. However, everyone else saw them as 2 entitled lunatics. Security took my parents out of Caldwell's office as if they were shoplifters who refused to confess they were caught. But I knew it was not over. People like them do not absorb no. They interpret it as, try again louder. I did not wait. I drove immediately to the courts to file for a temporary restraining order. The judge signed it that afternoon. That night a process server handed them the documents, and I emailed the case number to the police to ensure it was on file. I expected at least a week until the next stunt, but they didn't even allow me 48 hours. The driveway camera showed their rental car creeping in after dark, headlights lowered as if they assumed Hertz offered stealth mode for free. My mother was dressed like she was going to church, and my father looked like he was prepared to market himself as a motivational speaker. Both went up my driveway as if the place belonged to them. The doorbell continued to ring. They leaned on it, as if they were restarting the home. I opened the door just enough to obstruct the entryway. Restraining orders still active. You can't be here. Mom smiled with that phony kindness she often had for those she wanted something from. We just want 5 minutes. Great, I said. Take it outside the gate. You've got 4.5 left. Naturally they shoved past me, as if I were a rental property manager. Dad studied every part of the foyer, as if he were mentally listing everything on Craigslist. Mom trailed her hand along the banister, as if she were already deciding where to place her vases. This place, she remarked, glancing around in her sales pitch tone. It was meant for family. It is, I said. Just not the kind that abandons their kid and comes back 20 years later with a handout. That shattered her smile for a moment, Then Dad stepped in. Drop the attitude. Without us, you'd still be nothing. You owe us. I cocked my head toward the corner where the red light flashed. Say it louder for the camera. Judges love this kind of material. His face turned crimson. Mom moved to the guilt trip script, telling me how difficult it was to raise children, how much they sacrificed, and how ungrateful I was. Dad used intimidation tactics, puffing his chest, lifting his chin, and screaming phrases about respect. It was like watching the world's worst performers compete to see who could sound the most delusional. I did not budge. I leaned against the wall and let them finish the script until they realized I wasn't interrupting. When they ran out of lines, I gestured towards the driveway. Time's up. Walk out, or the cops escort you. Dad smirked. Call them. We'll tell them our son locked his own parents out of their home. Perfect, I replied, immediately dialing. Make sure you spell trespassing right when you file your complaint. Cops arrived quickly than I thought. They were previously aware of the restraining order and had completed the necessary paperwork. They answered questions out of politeness, but their body language was clear. They were tired of repeat offenders wasting time. After a brief conversation, the police informed my parents that they had 60 seconds to go or they would be riding in the back seat. My mother gave one more sympathy speech, and my father murmured about misunderstandings, but it didn't matter. They returned to their rental and peeled out, looking smaller than I had ever seen them. For the first time, I recognized they were neither powerful nor frightening. They were simply noisy. The house felt different after they left. Not in a hefty way, but in the sense that no one was circling to take it. It was mine. Graham's legacy. And I wasn't going to let two freeloaders with my DNA rip it apart. I did not squander time. The next morning, I met with the operations and finance leaders. We tore into the firm as Graham would have desired. There's no fluff or dead weight to drag. We removed non-selling products, repaired the shipping system that was costing us money, and redesigned the web store so it didn't appear like it was constructed on dial-up. Within 2 months, internet sales had doubled. The physical stores eventually moved inventory when we stopped allowing boxes to rot in the back. By the end of the quarter, we had approved 2 new growth sites, the ones Graham had circled in his notes years prior. But this time, it wasn't a gamble. It was regulated, clean, and profitable. Employees noticed. They initially regarded me as if I had been fortunate enough to inherit a business from my uncle. But when problems were fixed before they snowballed, paychecks were delivered on time, and I was present rather than hiding in some corner office, they began bringing me serious issues before they became fires. That is how you gain trust. Not with speeches, but with representatives. At home, I kept going through Graham's notes. There was one box I hadn't opened until recently, a wooden chest that he kept shut. Inside were ledgers, correspondence, and a stack of envelopes labeled with the year. His method of leaving me breadcrumbs. The most recent one stated, "When you are ready." Inside is a single sheet of paper. Trust yourself. Do not wait for permission. Build it better than I did. Short, crisp, and straight to the point. Exactly like him. I still had the cameras rolling. Maybe my parents will try again. Perhaps they won't. Entitlement does not die. It simply hides until it believes you're exhausted. But I was not exhausted. Every time I drove by the lot where our new store was being built, every time a balance sheet showed black instead of red, and every time I closed up the house knowing it was safe, it seemed like another nail in their coffin of control. They got their shot when I was a kid. They threw it aside. Graham scooped it up and transformed it into something. And now it was up to me to help it thrive rather than just survive. That is what kept me moving forward. The last time I saw my parents was on a blurry video from outside the fence. They drove slowly, windows down, staring like visitors who couldn't buy the ticket inside. They did not stop. They did not ring. They just peered, undoubtedly aware that the only way they'd ever see the interior was through the security camera. I didn't wave. I did not even step outdoors. I simply let the camera film them drive away, smaller and smaller, until they vanished. Graham shared with me once. Some people grow when they lose power. Others shrink. Your parents, they'll shrink. You better grow. I didn't understand it then. Now I do. And while I stood in the office looking at our quarterly stats on the screen, hearing staff joke in the hallway, and watching construction crews break ground on new stores, I realized I was maturing.